I'm not suggesting humans are particularly impressive. Captain Zixar adjusted his sensory organs with an eye roll. I'm simply pointing out their irritating habit of surviving scenarios that would annihilate any reasonable species. Lieutenant Vermka clicked her mandibles dismissively, claiming he had been indulging in their entertainment broadcasts once more, dismissing them as mere mammals with inflated egos. The two Galactic Union officers were stationed in Sector 8, a relatively calm region that happened to include a small blue-green planet situated on the outer edge of an ordinary spiral galaxy. Their mission was straightforward: observe but do not interfere. The humans had not yet achieved true faster-than-light travel, disqualifying them from first contact according to Union protocols. Zixlar displayed a holographic projection, inquiring if Vermka had reviewed the latest report. He noted that their planet was simultaneously experiencing climate crises, political instability, resource scarcity, and something called reality television, yet they were still rapidly advancing their technology. He found it incomprehensible. Vermka shrugged all six of her shoulders, calling them resilient parasites and noting that the universe had plenty of those. Suddenly, the communication panel illuminated with an incoming transmission coded with the highest priority. Zixlar and Vermka exchanged worried glances, or their species' closest equivalent. Zixlar muttered that it was unusual as he accepted the transmission. Admiral Coralvine's stern face filled the screen, his crystalline features refracting light in patterns that conveyed extreme agitation. The Admiral's voice resonated with harmonics that conveyed urgency, stating they had a situation. Vermka's exoskeleton paled as the Admiral revealed that the Draxians had decided to disregard Union protocols and had initiated contact with Earth. Vermka asked about the Draxians, but the Admiral interrupted, confirming that the Draxians were the most technologically advanced predatory species in the known universe, and apparently they had developed a taste for human innovation. Zixlar's appendages trembled slightly as he respectfully questioned whether they should warn the humans, noting that the Draxians didn't contact species, they harvested them. Admiral Corvin's face hardened, clarifying that was precisely why he was contacting them. The Union Council had authorized an emergency exception to the non-interference directive, instructing them to proceed to Earth immediately and assist the humans. Vermka sounded incredulous, questioning how they could assist them against the Draxians, which was akin to giving a primitive ape a stick to fight a quantum-phase predator. The Admiral's tone allowed no argument, reiterating that the Draxians must not be allowed to acquire human technology, as it was too unpredictable. After the transmission concluded, Zixlar and Vermka sat in stunned silence for several moments. Finally, Zixlar set coordinates for Earth, remarking that at least they would get to observe these creatures up close before they were exterminated. Vermka nodded grimly, lamenting that the poor bastards wouldn't even know what hit them. Dr. Eleanor Walker was having a particularly awful day. First, the lab's coffee machine had broken down, a catastrophe of biblical proportions by scientific standards. Then, 3 of her carefully cultivated bacterial cultures had mysteriously died overnight. And now, just as she was about to pack up and call it quits, every electronic device in her laboratory had simultaneously malfunctioned. She muttered, watching her computer screen flicker through a rainbow of colors that were definitely not part of the standard operating system, and threatened to reconfigure Gary from IT's DNA to give him perpetual hiccups if he was trying to be funny again. Eleanor was the head researcher at the Quantum Biological Systems Lab, a cutting-edge facility buried within the bureaucratic maze of a government research complex. Her team specialized in the intersection of quantum mechanics and biological systems, a field that most serious scientists had once dismissed as pseudo-scientific nonsense, until Eleanor and her team had spectacularly proven them wrong by developing quantum-entangled bacteria that could theoretically communicate instantaneously across any distance. The technology was still in its infancy, but the implications were staggering. Instantaneous communication across the vastness of space without the limitations of light speed. It would revolutionize humanity's approach to space exploration if she could get her equipment to work properly. Dr. Walker, her assistant. Oliver poked his head through the doorway, his perpetually disheveled appearance enhanced by the look of mild panic on his face. He said there were some people there to see her. Eleanor didn't look up from the malfunctioning equipment and told him to have them make an appointment like normal human beings. Oliver's voice dropped to a whisper, saying that he didn't think they were normal human beings or human beings at all. That got her attention. Eleanor finally looked up, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose, and asked what he was talking about. Oliver explained that they had just appeared in the lobby and security hadn't stopped them because, well, they said they couldn't see them, but he could, and now they were asking for her specifically. Eleanor stared at him, knowing Oliver was many things. Brilliant, awkward, possibly somewhere on the spectrum, but he wasn't prone to hallucinations or practical jokes. She sighed, standing up, and agreed to meet his invisible friends. As she followed Oliver down the hallway, Eleanor mentally cataloged the possible explanations: a prank by her colleagues, a psychological break from overwork, or perhaps someone had slipped something into her terrible cafeteria lunch. What she wasn't prepared for was the sight that greeted her in the lobby. Two figures stood in the center of the room. The security guards were at their stations, looking straight through the visitors as if they weren't there at all. One creature was tall and spindly with multiple appendages and what appeared to be a translucent exoskeleton. The other was shorter, more compact, with a body that seemed to shift and shimmer like liquid metal. The taller one spoke, not with sound, but directly into her mind, identifying himself as Captain Zixlar, with Lieutenant Vermke, representatives of the Galactic Union, and stating they required her immediate assistance. Eleanor stared, mouth slightly open. After a moment, she found her voice and remarked that it wasn't something you heard every day. The shorter one, Vermke, asked if she could see them, sounding surprised. Eleanor replied that she obviously could, and hear them, or think hear them, or whatever this was. Zixlar and Vermke exchanged what she could only interpret as significant glances. Zixlar mused that it was interesting, as most species couldn't perceive them through their phase shift technology. Eleanor said dryly that she was special like that and stated that she was having a really bad day, so unless they were there to fix her coffee machine or explain why her bacteria were dying, she would have to ask them to come back another time, preferably after she had had several strong drinks and come to terms with the fact that aliens were real. Vermke suddenly mentioned her bacteria, the quantum entangled ones, and stated that was why they were there. Eleanor froze, asking how they knew about that, as the research was classified. Zixlar replied that they knew many things about her species, but there was no time to explain, as her planet was in imminent danger. He said the Draxians were coming and were particularly interested in her work. Eleanor asked who now. Vermette repeated impatiently that the Draxians were the most advanced predatory species she could conceive, and then giving them technology thousands of years beyond her comprehension and a moral code that made her historical dictators look like benevolent caregivers. Eleanor said they sounded charming and asked if they were coming to Earth. Zixlar corrected her, stating that they had arrived, detecting their ship entering her solar system approximately 6 of her hours ago, and they would reach Earth within 24 hours. Eleanor took a deep breath and asked to confirm that super-advanced alien predators were on their way to Earth, possibly to steal her research, and they were there to help. Zixlar confirmed that was precisely correct. Eleanor asked if it was out of the goodness of their hearts or whatever organs they had that served that function. Vermitic made a sound that might have been a laugh, stating that the Union had a vested interest in preventing Draxian expansion, and they should leave it at that. Eleanor looked between them, then at Oliver, who was staring at her with wide eyes. To the security guards, it must have appeared as if they were having an animated conversation with thin air. Eleanor stated that the day couldn't possibly get any weirder, so she agreed to save the world from space predators, but first she needed coffee. As it turned out, alien technology could indeed fix a broken coffee machine. It could also transform said machine into a device that produced the most sublime caffeine-based beverage Eleanor had ever tasted. She murmured that it was amazing, cradling the cup like a precious artifact, and that if they had led with that, she would have believed them immediately. They had relocated to her lab where Zixlar was examining her equipment with what appeared to be genuine interest, while Verm paced nervously by the window. Zixlar commented that her quantum entanglement approach was quite innovative, and that most species attempted to achieve quantum communication through inorganic means, making the use of biological systems as the foundation unusual. Eleanor thanked him, she thought, and took another sip of the miraculous coffee. She asked why these Draxians were so interested in her work specifically. Varric stopped pacing and explained that the Draxians had mastered virtually every technology imaginable, with one exception, biological quantum entanglement. Their physiology was fundamentally incompatible with the process, which made her research invaluable to them. Zixlar added that with it they could establish instantaneous communication networks across their territories, greatly enhancing their already formidable military capabilities. Eleanor frowned, pointing out that her research was nowhere near that advanced, and they had barely managed to entangle bacteria over a few meters, let alone across space. Vermek explained that the principles were what mattered, and once they understood her approach, they could accelerate the development using their existing knowledge. Eleanor muttered that she had accidentally created the key to helping space monsters improve their evil empire, and that was going on her resume for sure. Oliver, who had been quietly absorbing everything from a corner of the lab, finally spoke up and asked if they couldn't just destroy the research if it was that dangerous. Eleanor and Zixlar exclaimed simultaneously that they couldn't. Eleanor explained that the research itself wasn't the problem, as it could revolutionize human communication, medicine, and space exploration. Zixlar added grimly that the Draxians would simply extract the knowledge directly from her mind, and they had ways of doing that which were unpleasant. A heavy silence fell over the room. Eleanor finally asked what the plan was, pointing out that they had said they were there to help, but they were just two of whatever they were against an advanced predatory species with technology thousands of years beyond theirs. Vermtuk made the laughing sound again, stating that they weren't going to fight them, as that would be suicide. Eleanor asked what then. Zixlar's sensory appendages wiggled in what might have been embarrassment, and he explained that they were hoping she might have ideas, as humans had a reputation for being unexpectedly resourceful. Eleanor stared at them incredulously and asked to confirm that they had come all this way to warn them about an existential threat, but they didn't actually have a plan to deal with it. Vermeek said defensively that the Union's protocols were quite clear. They were to inform, advise, and provide limited technological assistance, and direct intervention in species conflicts was strictly prohibited. Eleanor said dryly that it was convenient for them. Actually, Oliver interjected, he might have an idea. All eyes turned to him, and he seemed to shrink slightly under the attention. He stated that it was about the bacteria, and asked what if they could weaponize them somehow. Zixlar's appendages stiffened, noting that biological warfare was prohibited. Oliver clarified quickly that he didn't mean as a disease, but if the Draxians were coming for the quantum entanglement technology, maybe they could use that same technology against them, a sort of quantum trap. Eleanor's eyes widened as she caught on, mentioning the phase variance in the entanglement field. Oliver, she exclaimed, was a genius. He blinked and asked if someone would please explain. Eleanor was already moving around the lab, pulling up data on screens and gathering equipment. She explained that one of the challenges they faced with quantum-entangled bacteria was controlling the phase variance, and sometimes when the entanglement wasn't perfectly stable, it created a cascade effect in nearby quantum systems, a quantum disruption. Zixlar realized how that would help against Draxian technology and asked if all advanced technology didn't rely on quantum principles to some degree. Eleanor asked that if they could trigger a large enough cascade, it might temporarily disable their systems. Vermont muttered that it might create a tear in the fabric of space-time that swallows your entire planet. Always the optimist. Eleanor shot back that unless he had a better idea, this was what they were going with. Zixlar seemed to be considering the proposal, stating that it wasn't entirely without merit, and Draxian technology did indeed rely heavily on quantum manipulation, but creating a disruption large enough to affect their ship would require an enormous amount of energy. Eleanor said to leave that to her and instructed Oliver to get on the phone with Director Fleming Tell him it was a code black and that she needed access to the particle accelerator, the one that's still experimental, that hasn't been properly tested. Oliver asked nervously if that was the one. Eleanor confirmed and asked him to tell him they were going to need every quantum physicist in the country on a video call in 1 hour. As Oliver hurried off, Varric turned to Zixlar, stating that the plan seemed extremely risky. Zixlar agreed, adding that it was likely to violate at least 17 Union regulations. There was a pause, and he stated that he found he didn't particularly care at that moment. Eleanor looked up from her work, stating that they were welcome to humanity's influence, as they specialized in making others throw rulebooks out the window. 12 hours later, the underground facility housing the experimental particle accelerator was abuzz with activity. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel rushed about following Eleanor's increasingly urgent directives. In the center of it all, Eleanor worked alongside Zixlar and Vermic, who had provided critical insights into Draxian technology. Director Fleming, a stern man with a military background who had initially balked at Eleanor's wild claims, had become a believer once Zixlar had demonstrated the ability to make himself visible to everyone. The director had promptly declared a national security emergency and mobilized every resource at his disposal. Zixlar announced that the Draxian ship had entered Earth's atmosphere, and they were maintaining high orbit for now, but they had begun scanning for quantum signatures. Eleanor murmured that they would find them soon enough, making final adjustments to what they had dubbed the quantum disruptor, essentially a modified particle accelerator designed to amplify the phase variance in her quantum entangled bacteria to unprecedented levels. Fleming demanded how long until the device was ready. Eleanor replied without looking up that it would be 20 minutes, maybe less, but they had another problem. Someone needed to be there to activate it manually once the Draxians were in range, and the timing had to be perfect. Oliver volunteered immediately. Eleanor shook her head, stating it had to be her, as she was the only one who understood exactly how the bacteria would respond. Fleming objected that it was unacceptable, as she was too valuable. Eleanor cut him off, stating it wasn't a democracy, it was her research, her bacteria, and her responsibility, and besides, she was the one who accidentally created what might be the downfall of their species, so it seemed only fair she should be the one to fix it. Before Fleming could argue further, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Vermic announced grimly that Draxian scouts were entering the atmosphere directly above their location. Fleming ordered everyone to get out immediately, shifting into evacuation mode, and instructed them to get to the bunkers and wait for the all clear. As personnel streamed toward the exits, Eleanor continued working feverishly. Zixlar approached her, his alien features difficult to read, and asked if she understood the danger. She confirmed, and he asked quietly that if the quantum cascade became unstable, she would be atomized at the subatomic level. Eleanor finished for him, stating she was aware of the occupational hazards. He asked, yet she remained. Eleanor shrugged, not looking up from her work, and said that someone had to. Zixlar was silent for a moment, then stated that the Union had misunderstood her species. They saw their conflicts, their divisions, their seemingly self-destructive tendencies, and concluded they were primitive and chaotic. Eleanor said with a small smile that they were, but they were also stubborn as hell, a formidable combination. Zixlar acknowledged and stated that Lieutenant Vermic and he would return to their ship and attempt to distract the Draxians to give her more time. Eleanor said to be careful, as she'd hate to lose the only aliens she'd ever met before she got a chance to write a paper about them. Zixlar made a sound that might have been a chuckle and stated that they would meet again. Dr. Walker. Of that he was certain. After the aliens departed, only Eleanor, Oliver, and Director Fleming remained in the vast chamber housing the particle accelerator. Eleanor told them they should both go, making the final connections on the quantum disruptor, and that she could handle it from there. Oliver replied stubbornly that there was not a chance, as he had been her assistant for 3 years, and he wasn't abandoning her now. Fleming checked his sidearm, a laughably inadequate weapon against what they were facing, but it seemed to give him comfort, and stated that the United States government doesn't abandon its scientists to alien invaders, as it's bad for recruitment. Despite everything, Eleanor laughed and said fine. She instructed Oliver to monitor the quantum field strength and directed Fleming to keep an eye on those scanners, as she needed to know the moment the Draxians entered the upper atmosphere above them. They worked in tense silence for several minutes, the only sounds the hum of equipment and the distant wail of evacuation sirens. Fleming suddenly called, his voice tight, and stated they had company. Eleanor looked up at the main screen. A massive ship, unlike anything human engineering could produce, was descending through the clouds directly above their facility. It was enormous, easily the size of a small city, with a design that somehow managed to look both organic and mechanical at once. Oliver whispered that it was bigger than he expected. Eleanor reported that the quantum field generator was at 90% and she just needed a few more minutes. Fleming replied grimly that they may not have a few more minutes, watching as smaller craft began to deploy from the massive ship. The facility shuddered as something impacted the ground above them. Fleming announced unnecessarily that they were landing, and the defense systems were engaging, but a much larger explosion cut him off, and the lights flickered ominously. He concluded grimly that their surface defenses had been neutralized. Eleanor reported 95%, and her fingers flew over controls, stating she was almost there. Another explosion, closer this time, sent dust raining from the ceiling. Fleming said that they were breaching the outer perimeter, raising his weapon. "Dr. Walker, how much longer?" he asked. Eleanor called 20 seconds, refusing to look away from her instruments. The massive blast doors at the far end of the chamber began to glow red, then orange, then white with heat, and Oliver's voice cracked with fear. Eleanor called 10 seconds, refusing to look away from her instruments. The center of the blast door suddenly collapsed inward, molten metal splattering across the floor. Through the opening, they could see figures moving, tall, sleek figures, almost reptilian in appearance but with an unsettling mechanical precision in their movements, were met with Fleming's gunfire, the weapon's report deafening within the confined space. The bullets, however, seemed to have no effect. Within 10 seconds, the first Draxian strode through the breach. Easily 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales and eyes that glowed with an unnatural intelligence, it surveyed the room with a dismissive air before focusing on Eleanor and the equipment surrounding her. "Human," it said, its voice strangely melodic yet utterly devoid of emotion. "Your resistance is noted but irrelevant. Surrender your research and your death will be swift." "Funny," Eleanor retorted, her hand hovering over the activation switch. "I was about to make you the same offer." The Draxian's eyes narrowed. "You cannot comprehend the technology you are tampering with. Your species is barely beyond using combustion for propulsion." "Yeah, we're pretty backward," Eleanor agreed. "But we do have one redeeming quality." "And what is that?" the Draxian inquired, taking another step forward. Eleanor smiled and pressed the switch. "We're really good at improvising." The particle accelerator roared to life, energy surging through the quantum-entangled bacteria at its core. The phase variants began to cascade precisely as they had planned. The Draxian's confident demeanor faltered as its technology began to malfunction. Its scales, which Eleanor now realized were a form of advanced tech organic armor, flickered and distorted. What have you done?" it demanded, its melodic voice now discordant and glitching. "Created a localized quantum disruption field," Eleanor explained, as calmly as if she were giving a lecture. "Turns out when you mess with the fundamental forces that hold reality together, even fancy alien tech has a hard time functioning properly." More Draxians were entering through the breach, all experiencing the same disturbing malfunctions. Some collapsed entirely, their systems completely overwhelmed. The late Draxians staggered forward, fighting against the quantum disruption. That changes nothing. Our fleet will—" "Your fleet is experiencing the same problems," Eleanor interrupted, pointing to a display showing the massive Draxian ship above them. It was listing to one side, lights flickering erratically across its surface. "Quantum entanglement is a fascinating phenomenon. Once established, distance becomes irrelevant. The disruption affecting you is simultaneously affecting every piece of Draxian technology within Earth's orbit." The Draxian's glowing eyes flickered, but its determination remained. "Then we will wait," Your disruption cannot be maintained indefinitely. True, Eleanor conceded, but it doesn't need to be. She nodded to Oliver, who activated a secondary system they had prepared. We've just transmitted the quantum disruption formula to every major scientific institution on Earth. Within hours, disruption generators will be operational worldwide. Any Draxian technology that enters Earth's atmosphere will immediately cease functioning. Impossible, the Draxian hissed. No primitive species could. Here's the thing about us primitive humans, Eleanor cut in. We're really good at figuring out how to break things, especially when those things are trying to kill us. The Draxian seemed to consider this, its alien features impossible to read. Then, without warning, it began to laugh, a chilling, inhuman sound that echoed through the chamber. Perhaps, it finally said, we have underestimated your species. It's a common mistake, Eleanor replied. Now I suggest you gather your troops and leave before the quantum disruption permanently damages your neural interfaces. That would be unpleasant. For a tense moment, it seemed the Draxian might attack regardless of the consequences. Then, with a gesture that might have been respect or possibly just resignation, it turned and began herding its malfunctioning companions back through the breach. This isn't over, human, it called back. We will adapt, we will return, and we'll be ready. Eleanor promised, oh, and you might want to spread the word to other predatory species out there. Earth is now officially off limits. When the last Draxian had retreated, Fleming finally lowered his weapon, his hand shaking slightly. Did we just win? For now, Eleanor replied, her adrenaline beginning to fade. They'll be back eventually with technology that's resistant to our quantum disruption, but by then we'll have advanced even further. Oliver was staring at the screens monitoring the Draxian ship, which was now rapidly ascending back into space. I can't believe it worked. We just fought off an alien invasion with bacteria. Quantum entangled bacteria, Eleanor corrected with a tired smile. It makes all the difference. 3 months later, Eleanor stood on the roof of the research facility, gazing up at the night sky. The Draxian incident, as it was now known, had transformed humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. The knowledge that they were not alone, and that some of what was out there was decidedly unfriendly, had initially caused panic, but it had quickly given way to an unprecedented global cooperation. Eleanor's quantum disruption technology had been shared worldwide, and defensive systems had been established on every continent. More importantly, her research into quantum entangled bacteria had accelerated exponentially, with applications now extending to everything from medicine to communications. Stargazing, Dr. Walker? A familiar voice that wasn't a voice spoke in her mind. Eleanor turned to find Zixlar standing behind her, his alien form shimmering slightly in the moonlight. Captain, she greeted him with a genuine smile. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about us. Hardly, Zixlar replied, joining her at the railing. The Union has been quite occupied with the aftermath of your encounter with the Draxians. Oh? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Did they complain to the management? In a manner of speaking, Zixlar's sensory appendages wiggled with what she now recognized as amusement. The Draxians have formally requested that the Union classify humans as a protected aggressive species. Eleanor burst out laughing. Protected aggressive? Is that even a category? It is now, Zixlar confirmed. It means other species are warned to avoid contact unless prepared for significant resistance. So we've been labeled as dangerous, do not approach. Eleanor shook her head, still chuckling. I suppose there are worse reputations to have out there. Indeed, Zixlar agreed. The Union Council was quite impressed with your solution, by the way. Quantum disruption as a defensive strategy had been theorized but never successfully implemented before. Just doing what humans do best, Eleanor shrugged. Figuring things out when our backs are against the wall. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, contemplating the stars. Lieutenant Varick sends her regards, Zixlar eventually said. She's been assigned to oversee the establishment of a monitoring outpost near your solar system. So we're getting our own alien babysitters now? More like diplomatic observers, Zixler corrected. Your species has attracted considerable attention. The Union believes it would be prudent to establish official channels of communication. Eleanor turned to face him fully. Are you saying what I think you're saying? The Union Council has voted to extend an invitation for Earth to become an associate member of the Galactic Union, Zixler confirmed. It's unprecedented for a species that hasn't independently developed FTL travel, but exceptions can be made for exceptional circumstances. And are quantum bacteria qualified as exceptional circumstances? That and the fact that you managed to repel a Draxian assault force with technology cobbled together in less than 24 hours, Zixler replied. It made quite an impression. Eleanor laughed again. Wait until they see what we can do with proper preparation time. That, Zixler said, his mental voice carrying a note of both amusement and caution, is precisely what has the Council both excited and terrified. As it should be, Eleanor replied with a grin. We're just getting started. Above them, the stars seemed a little brighter, a little closer than before, and somewhere out there, word was spreading across the galaxy. The humans of Earth were no longer asking for help. They were ready to be feared. In the grand scheme of the universe, Earth was still just a tiny blue dot orbiting an ordinary star in an unremarkable galaxy. But perceptions were changing rapidly. In space dock lounges and alien marketplaces across the known sectors, rumors spread about the strange mammals who had repelled the Draxians with primitive technology and sheer audacity. I heard they disabled an entire Draxian battle fleet with microscopic organisms, a Talaxian merchant whispered to his companions. That's nothing, replied a grizzled Vorn trader. My cousin's shipmate swears they've got a weapon that can disrupt the fabric of space-time itself. The rumors grew more outlandish with each retelling, but the core truth remained. Humanity had stood up to one of the most feared species in the galaxy and not only survived, but emerged victorious. In the Galactic Union Council chambers, heated debates raged about how to properly integrate these unpredictable humans into the galactic community. Some advocated for caution and containment, while others saw potential allies in the ongoing Cold War with the Draxian Empire. And on Earth, humanity did what it had always done best, adapted, innovated, and prepared for whatever the universe might throw at them next. The quantum disruption technology had already spawned dozens of new research fields, global defense systems were being established, and Eleanor Walker had become the reluctant face of humanity's new relationship with the stars, dividing her time between advancing her research and participating in preliminary diplomatic discussions with union representatives. You know, Oliver remarked one day as they worked in the lab, now significantly upgraded with technology provided by the Union, I never thought I'd say this, but getting threatened with extinction by alien predators might be the best thing that ever happened to our species. Eleanor looked up from the quantum interface she was calibrating. How do you figure? Look around, he gestured broadly. 6 months ago, nations were arguing about border disputes and economic policies. Now they're pooling resources to build orbital defense platforms and accelerate space exploration. We've made more technological progress in the last 3 months than in the previous decade. Nothing unites people like a common enemy, Eleanor agreed. And the best part, Oliver continued, his eyes bright with excitement, we don't even need to worry about them coming back anytime soon. According to Captain Zixler, the Draxians are completely redesigning their technology to counter quantum disruption. It could take them years. Eleanor's expression grew more serious, which means we have years to prepare for their return. And trust me, they will return. But we'll be ready, Oliver said confidently. Eleanor smiled at his optimism. Yes, we will, and next time we won't just be defending ourselves. We'll be showing the galaxy exactly what humanity is capable of. Across the facility in a secure conference room, Director Fleming was concluding a video call with his international counterparts. The world's first unified space defense program had been approved, with Eleanor's quantum technology at its core. Gentlemen, ladies, he addressed the assembled officials, I believe we've taken the first steps toward ensuring humanity's security in a universe that's proven to be far more crowded and dangerous than we ever imagined. But let's not forget, this is just the beginning. One of the officials, a stern-faced woman representing the European Union, spoke up. The question remains, do we approach this new reality from a defensive posture, or do we take a more proactive stance? Fleming considered her question carefully. For now, we focus on defense and knowledge acquisition. We learn everything we can from our new allies in the Galactic Union. We strengthen our position, and then, prompted a representative from Japan, Fleming allowed himself a small smile. Then we show the galaxy that humanity is done asking for help. From now on, we help ourselves. As the meeting concluded, Fleming gazed out the window at the night sky, where the first of many orbital defense platforms was already under construction, visible as a bright point of light crossing the heavens. The universe had thrown down a gauntlet, and humanity had not only picked it up but was now using it to forge something new, something powerful, something uniquely human. The day humanity stopped asking for help and started getting feared had come and gone. What followed would be the days, years, and centuries of humanity proving exactly why that fear was justified. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the Draxians were already learning that painful lesson, the end.